How's it going, guys? Welcome to the Talk4 podcast. So excited to have you here today and show you this fantastic episode. Just want to say quickly that episodes like this one and all the ones before and the ones in future are made possible by people who subscribe. Hopefully, just like you. I'm going to ask you today if you can leave a subscribe, leave a follow, leave a rating, leave a like or a comment, and just support the show in the little ways that you can, like that. It makes a huge difference on my end. And quickly, just want to plug as well. I've taken 30 of the best episodes of this podcast and turned them into a fantastic book that goes into 150 secrets to greatness. Each one of those 30 episodes gets crunched down into 5 of the best key takeaways from the whole talk and turns them into a fantastic book. Highly recommend you check it out. Please support the show by grabbing a copy, either a paperback or an ebook. And I can't wait to show you guys this one today. So, guys, without further ado, let's get over to the episode. Daryl, my friend, how are you doing today? Welcome to the show. I'm very honored to have you here. This is going to be great.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great to be able to talk to you. I'm looking forward to it, and yeah, ready to get into some questions and some answers here. Let's do this thing.
It's going to be fun, definitely. I've got a really good list of stuff here to talk to you about, and should mention as well our good friend Dan Bradley, great connection from here. He's helped us line this up too from Hold Fast, and I can't wait to talk about all these great things that you're up to. You've got so many great things that you've done, but also great things you're working on right now too, and I can't wait to just cover all of it. But so we can get everyone on the same page before we get started here, we always do like a 30-60 second rough elevator pitch of just the kind of who you are, what your day job is, and just a little intro into the life of you. So you've just met me for the first time and you got to give me that quick pitch. Tell me a little bit about you.
Yeah, so Darrell Utt, born in Huntington, West Virginia, entered the Army all the way back in 1990, had a great career, started out as an infantry guy and then transitioned over to Special Forces, and that's where I remained for the rest of my career. Was able to do a lot of deployments in the Balkans, 4 different deployments to Iraq. So yeah, I have a lot of experience overseas and leading teams. Ended up retiring in January of 2017, and then went out into the civilian sector, put my big boy pants on, and did a few different jobs. My last full-time position, I was the chief of operations at the National Medal of Honor Museum Foundation. Did that for 2.5 years, and you just mentioned Dan Bradley of Holdfast and Clint Bruce, some great guys over there. So helping out on the Holdfast with some of their coaching and doing some public speaking. And I just started doing some leadership coaching with Rope Solutions. So that catches you all the way up to today's date with the things that I'm doing, and I'm sure we'll get into the book. We got to throw a book in there too at some point, but I'm sure we can get to that a little bit later on.
Definitely. And yeah, I think one thing that's super apparent straight away is just, Green Berets, that is a serious achievement, very difficult, very select group of people. And I think that's a testament really to a very advanced level of leadership and service and bravery. And the first thing that we like to do on this podcast is always look at people's backstories, how they came to be where they are. Obviously, you kind of gave us the snapshot there, but we'd love to dig into the kind of the full story, really. So from your beginnings in Huntington, West Virginia, to leading high stakes missions in hostile environments, can you just give us that walkthrough and that run through really of your journey into the special forces? So what were the motivations there? How did those early experiences kind of shape you to become, a special forces operator? And then going into training and getting in, walk us through it.
Yeah, I can't overlook the fact that my high school football coach was a National Guard Special Forces Sergeant Major, Carl Thornburg. He's still out there doing great things. He's in great shape. I recently had a chance to link up with him, and it made my heart feel good that I was able to see my old football coach that had such a huge impact on my career, even though I really didn't realize it as a young 17, 18-year-old kid. Like, it was just hard for me to wrap my mind around like what a Green Beret really was. I knew that he was a Green Beret, but it just didn't really like I didn't understand the impact until I went through basic training in AIT and spent a few years in the infantry. So that's kind of how I started, and I come from humble beginnings, and I wasn't really that guy that was, the best fit to probably go to college and to do all those things. And even if I was, my family didn't have the money to support that. So entered the military, spent some time in the infantry, and then things kind of came full circle when I got stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I got to spend some time around Fifth Special Forces Group. And then I started thinking back, like, oh, wait a minute, I've been around the special forces guy before. Like, that's what he was doing. I just didn't grasp it. But so I would say as a young E5, E6 at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, I got exposed to fifth group. I started seeing, those guys training on the ranges. And I can tell you something, man. It looked like what they were doing was a lot better than the things that we were doing in the infantry.
Hmm.
And I was very intrigued. I was very impressed. And that got my curiosity going, and I was intrigued by it. And then I really had a lot of moments of reflection, like, you know, I always feel like you have to have a strong why and a strong purpose if you're going to do something really difficult, or really if you're going to do anything, you need to have a strong why and a strong purpose. And when I started seeing fifth group in action, um, I really thought, like, man, if I'm going to stick around the military and possibly make a career of this, I want to be around the best guys and have the best training, and it's going to give me the best odds to survive if we're called to duty. So that's really got the juices flowing on the special forces side. Now, I did have to I had to deal with like imposter syndrome and a little bit of lack of confidence. Like, man, could I really do what those guys do? They were almost superhero status, so I had to kind of deal with that. And luckily, I had a 6-month deployment all the way back in 1995, the summer of 95. And our unit went over to Sinai, Egypt for peacekeeping, and I got in ridiculous shape. So that kind of helped with that self-confidence or lack of confidence. I got in great shape. I could do push-ups, I could do setups, I could run, uh, I could ruck. I was always good at doing ruck marches and things like that. But I really kind of like built that confidence up, and it was like, hey, I'm going to give it a shot. Like, they're going to have to tell me no, or they're going to have to drag me out of this place. So I decided to go to Special Forces Assessment Selection back in the fall of 96. And once again, when I showed up there, I had to deal with some imposter syndrome, and was blown away by the level of quality. The guys that I was seeing there was like, holy cow, man. Um, I like to say that there was a group of guys that I would put over on one side. They look like the NFL linebacker, like 6'3", 6'4", just big, like meaty, strong dudes. And then there was a group over here on the other side that were smaller, like maybe 5'10", 160, 170. Called those guys the gazelles. Those dudes could run, so fast. And it seemed like they had endurance that was off the charts. And well, I wasn't in either one of those categories. So I felt like I was just a normal, ordinary guy, but I had something that's really hard to measure, and that was a lot of heart and a don't quit mentality. The way I saw it was like, hey, I'm not going to quit. I hope I don't get hurt, but they're going to have to drag me out of this place before I leave. So that attribute right there really carried me far. And I think that grit and that determination that I grew up, around in West Virginia with blue collar, patriotic, hardworking, West Virginia folks really carried me far in the military and in the special forces. So I was fortunate, man. I was able to go through special forces assessment and selection and get selected to go to the special forces qualification course. And yeah, man, just really, really fortunate to be able to go through that process.
Yeah, definitely. Something I want to ask you at the back of all of that really is just You mentioned there that looking around at those guys, they seemed almost superhuman, and you had to go through your own journey of that sort of imposter syndrome where you were looking at them, sort of thinking, could that really be me? How do I sort of live up to this sort of standard? I wonder, do you feel like all of those guys, the people that you were looking at who seemed so superhuman, do you think that they inside internally actually felt the same way as you? Like all of those people felt that to some degree too, looking around at all the others around them, or in conversations with them, have you ever had that conversation where you've asked them how did they feel about looking at guys like you, for example, and stuff?
Well, I don't think anyone was having imposter syndrome by looking at just a normal, average, ordinary guy. But I do think that regardless of the folks that, for all those maybe out there that are listening and considering going to buds or selection or any of the other types of programs that the different branches have, there's always going to be that lack of confidence and imposter syndrome and things like that. And I, to be realistic, I'm sure that the guys that look like NFL football players probably felt that a little bit, and I'm sure the Gazelles had some of that. But I think the main thing that I would like to say with, I guess, the aesthetics of, just because a guy shows up, and you hear this a lot of Navy SEALs, they talk about this, and they come out, they have these NCAA like swim champions and polo champions and all these, like these just world, top class athletes and stuff like that. And a lot of those guys don't do that well. They're looking for something totally different, and they kind of weed those guys out. So that was something that I had the opportunity to see. There were a lot of guys there that quit, and they would typically wait till the middle of the night, and they would carry their gear out really quietly, and then you woke up in the morning, and there was a bunch of guys gone. And a guy like me, I kind of fed off that a little bit, and I don't like to make light of other people because it takes a lot of courage to raise your hand and to try something that you're not guaranteed to do well at. It takes a lot of courage to do that. So I'm not trying to knock those guys, but uh, um, it did kind of feed into me a little bit that, man, I'm sticking around like I'm doing good. It was like every day my confidence got higher and higher and higher. So just thought that was like an interesting, when you're doing that whole human experiment, uh, man, that stuff works. They've been doing it for decades. It works.
Nice. I'd love to talk a bit about the selection then. So when I think about famous military selection processes, I imagine for myself and a lot of other people, we instantly think Hell Week and the Navy SEALs. So I was wondering if you could talk us a little bit through what the selection process was like in the Green Berets, and obviously what the kind of contrast there was from the other ones, what you felt maybe was harder, what maybe was a bit different. Yeah, talk to me about that whole experience, really.
Yeah. So for Special Forces assessment and selection, it's 3 weeks, and my information and knowledge is a little dated because I went all the way back in '96, and I'm sure they've made a couple minor tweaks, but I think it's stayed pretty much the same. Initially you're doing all of your tests, your entry level physical fitness, your push-ups, your setups, your runs, your swim tests. A lot of those type of entry level just to make sure that you can meet the minimum standard to be there. So we did a lot of that, and then we moved into like more of the individual type things. We did the obstacle course. We did a lot of land navigation. We did a ton of land navigation, and that was something that that I thought was kind of interesting because it didn't phase me. I grew up being comfortable in the woods and hunting with my dad and things like that. But I realized quickly that some people aren't so comfortable in the woods. Some people aren't so comfortable in the woods at night, especially in North Carolina. You can get into some really thick draws, some swampy, thick, wet draws, and you can barely see your hand in front of your face. And surprisingly to me, some people aren't good with that. They just, that's not their thing. which is great. That's why it's there, to learn. Um, but we did a lot of land navigation and a lot of movement, and we continue to do our rucks and our runs. And then, by week 2, going into week 3, we started team week, and that's where they break you down into teams and they give you pretty much these impossible tasks that you need to accomplish. One of the most infamous, it's the 3-wheel Jeep, and they give you some ropes and some poles and a bunch of other things, and it's like, hey, here's your equipment, this is what you need to do. You need to go from point A to point B, and do the best that you can with what you have. And they would designate someone to be in charge, and the whole time, the instructors, they're not barking orders at you, or they're not yelling at you, or they're not praising you or complimenting you. They are writing things down in a little notebook. And that's another thing, um, that gets some people, that really messes with some people, because you don't know if they're writing something good, they're writing something bad, or they're writing the grocery list that their wife wants them to pick up, later on. Like, you have the slightest idea what's in that book, but it does mentally mess with you, especially if you're in charge. And another thing that messes with you, and this happened to me when I was tasked to be a leader, um, I went through and I did the best that I could. And I thought I was going to be in charge a little bit longer. And, I started doing my thing, and it seemed like maybe 15, 20 minutes. It seemed to go by really fast. And then it was like, hey, roster number so and so, go back to just being a regular person, and roster number so and so, you're now in charge. And that really, really messes with you, because it's like, did I just get fired? Was I not? Was I not being assertive? All these things really rush through your mind. It's really a lot of mental games. But you do the best that you can. Now, some of those team week events are very, very difficult, and they wear you down. And when you're carrying heavy objects, and like, let's say you're carrying a litter, and they would, one of the ones is you're rescuing a down pilot, and it seems like the pilot must weigh 500 pounds, because it's like a huge duffel bag of sand. And you got the team that's all grabbed a piece of it, and you're trying to carry this over a long distance. It will wear you out, mentally and physically. And one of the events that really got me, like, I was like, man, my bones are going to go through my feet. Like, that's how strenuous it was. It was called the Sand Babies, and I wish I remembered the whole setup. But it was basically, we had these sandbags that we had to carry on our back, and the distance wasn't that great, but they had like these little berms, throughout the distance, a couple hundred meters. So you would walk flat on sand, and then you had a berm that you had to go over, and then you walk flat again. But after doing that for a few hours, I literally thought something is going to protrude from the bottom of my feet like a bone, because
Oh my
it
gosh.
really, man, it wore me down. But then toward the end of selection, there's a very, very long ruck march that you do, and that's one of the last things. And I know there's been rumors that it's 30 miles, it's 40 miles, however long it is. I've done a lot of 25-mile road marches in my career, because we had to do one of those. We had to do a 25-mile road march every 6 months when I was an infantry guy out on the West Coast. So I know what a 25-mile road march is. And this was longer than that. I don't know the exact distance, um, but it was a long one. And that was like one of the last things. And man, I tell you, it's the feeling of getting through that, is one of elation. And then quickly you're scared to death, because you made it, but then you're waiting to see if you really, really made it, because they have such a thing as a 21-day non-select. That means you've went all the way through selection. You've completed most of, all of the tasks, but for whatever reason, they didn't select you. Man, that's just a tough one. So I went from being elated that I made it, then being scared to death, and then to being even more scared to death because they started calling out roster numbers, and my number wasn't called right away. So I didn't know if they were calling the non-selects or if everybody remaining was good. Turns out they called out the non-selects first, and once they moved them out of the way and they were in a totally different spot, then they said, "Congratulations, you've been selected." So man, that was great. Now I would like to say really quick, if I can, people have asked me, okay, you've been to Ranger School and you've been to Special Forces Assessment Selection, like which one was tougher? Um, and man, that's a great question. So 1996, I was 24. I was 24 years old when I went through Special Forces Assessment and Selection at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I was 30 years old when I went through Ranger School at Fort Benning and Dahlonega and the swamps in Florida. So I will say, if I had to compare any part, like it's really not a fair comparison, but because Ranger School is 2 months, is 60 days, and Special Forces Assessment Selection is 3 weeks. But if I had to compare, like take 3 weeks of that Special Forces Assessment Selection and compare it to any 3 weeks in Ranger School, Ranger School can't compete with Special Forces Assessment Selection. Where they can compete is it's longer, like the pain is longer, the agony, they drag it out more, because I went through Benning phase, I went through Dahlonega, strong, man. I was like, man, this ain't that bad. And I got humbled. I had to eat a big piece of humble pie when I got to Florida phase and started getting my feet wet and started walking around the sand. And man, I got humbled because it quickly broke me down. It all caught up to me in Florida phase. And I think for each guy, there's difference. Some guys, mountains, humping the TVD, the Tennessee Valley Divide, that breaks a lot of people. I was good, man, but Florida broke me down. So it's kind of a tricky question. Special Force assessments and Special Force assessment selection was the toughest 3 weeks that I've ever done. But Ranger School is no joke, man. Ranger School is no joke.
Yeah, that sums it up. And I, instantly kind of trying to put myself in your shoes at least a little bit. I imagine that finishing a monumental effort like that and then getting to the end of it and then that fear setting in. I think one of the things that would go through my head constantly would be just, did I have more to give in all of that? Was that something that you were thinking at the very back end of that?
Um, I would say like going to Special Forces Assessment Selection, afterwards, I was like, man, I was pretty beat down. I don't know if I could have hung around much longer. I'm sure I could have probably done a few more days, but if we'd had to do like a back-to-back team week thing, man, that would have been really tough. And man, I have so much respect for the guys that go there and they make it 21 days and they don't get selected because it's pain, man. It's a lot of pain. And then they go back because they have a lot of heart and they have the will and they want to do it. And man, that's nothing but respect here. And it's the same way I feel with Ranger School. A lot of guys, they fail Ranger School and they get recycled. They have to do another phase. There's some people that have basically recycled each phase. I say guys and gals with Ranger School, and they hang in there and they keep doing those phases over and over. And it's like, man, that was very tough for me. And I made it straight through. I started in February of 2000 and I graduated in April. And I was just so fortunate, so blessed to make it straight through. And, for the people that don't, like their time in Ranger School was like double or 2.5 times of what I did. So it's like, man, that's a strong person. Uh, Probably had a little bit more in the tank, uh, you know, but both courses are so tough, and Florida definitely caught up to me.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, great story. And obviously, the thing with all that then is that's just the training and the selection. Then you got to go into the real thing, and that's a whole, can of worms in itself too. And I guess one of the things I wanted to go into there, which obviously kind of spoke about there just a bit too, is just these selection processes. They look for leaders and they look to find who's capable of leading, and not just of teams, but also of oneself too. And the ultimate objective there is leading high stake missions in hostile environments. And I've written down here, requires leadership, strategy, and mental toughness. All those three big things to create someone who can take it, essentially. So I guess seeing the people that you've been around, your own journey through all of this, everything you've learned, and now the things that you're doing, consulting and leadership coaching, these kinds of things. What do you think are the key qualities of an effective leader then? And how did you embody those during your time in the Green Berets?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I was very fortunate, man. I was able to be around some great leaders. In addition to my football coach that I mentioned already, Carl Thornburg. Um, I was also around another great leader in special forces when I was in Stuttgart, Germany. His name is Scott Brazil. And Scott Brazil to me was a guy that had instant credibility, um, because of his background. He'd been in Delta, and he had worked with two of my heroes, my absolute heroes for my entire career, still heroes to this day. They were both killed, unfortunately and tragically. They were both killed in Mogadishu, Somalia on October 3rd. And that's Master Sergeant Gary Gordon and Sergeant First Class Randy Shugart. Both, were Delta Force snipers for that operation. And um, Scott had a picture of both of them in his office the whole time that he was my company sergeant major. So I was very, very fortunate and lucky to have a great leader like him. And Scott was the kind of leader that he didn't yell and, didn't get all red faced and spit coming out of his mouth and things like that when he got angry. He was one of those guys that was really calm, and he could make you just melt by saying, like, Daryl, really disappointed in you. I thought you could have done a lot better on, whatever it might be. And that's very calm. Like, that's not, he's not angry, he's not yelling, but it just makes you just want to melt into the floor because you just disappointed someone that you hold in such high esteem and have so much respect for. So I got to see the way that he led, and it wasn't by barking orders. It was more of, by inspiration and, basically, just like do the things that I do because I'm going to do them really, really well. So, he had a lot of influence. Like he was an influencer because he could lead. And I remember Scott, he took us out on a run, and he wasn't a fast runner. And I'm not saying he was slow either, but he took us out on a really regular pace run, the whole special forces company. And this is when he was a newer company sergeant major. This is the kind of guy Scott was. He took us out on this run. We didn't know how long we were going. It was just like, follow me. And we went and ran all over the flipping forest in Germany. And it was a little bit of rain, and we were wet and muddy. And we ran for a good while, probably no more than 8 to 10 miles. And then we came back to where we started, and we had a lot of people that weren't there. Well, not a lot of people, but we had a few people that weren't there. They had, for whatever reason, they had fallen out of the run. And Scott formed us all back up, and he was in front of us, and he waited for all those guys to come back up, and they were in like a little certain. They were kind of split off from us, but he said in front of the whole group, he's like, "Hey, we just did a run. It wasn't that fast. It wasn't that slow, but I want you guys to pay attention to who were those people that were there to your left and right that stayed with it the whole entire time, and they didn't fall out of the run, because if things get bad and we end up in combat, you need to be able to count on the person to your left and right being there no matter what the circumstance, no matter what the situation. You need to be able to count on those people being to your left and to your right. Now, if those people aren't there to your left and right, can you really trust them if things get really bad? And that was like, I was so glad I was in a group that hung tight, but I couldn't imagine what those guys were feeling when he said that didn't stick with the run, because it was such a great learning point. But once again, he was a guy that influenced through his action, through his leadership. Wasn't like authoritarian. He was calm. He was courageous. So a lot of those things I picked up from Scott, and he didn't freak out about stuff that was outside his control. And we're going to talk about a little bit later on, with Grit to Glory and some of the life principles that I talk about in that book. But I definitely developed a lot of those leadership traits and principles from guys like Scott Brazil. Now, I also learned things from leaders that I didn't feel did such a great job, both in the infantry and in special forces. That's just the way, it's life. It's going to happen. It doesn't matter what unit you're in or what civilian corporation that you work for. There's going to be good leaders. There's going to be bad leaders. So I learned a lot from some of those bad leaders. Like, I never want to be like that person. So I think that's important. But you know, hopefully that kind of helped answer that question. I would say too, another huge point, trust. You know, people have to trust you, and they know that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. Because if you don't have that trust, it's really difficult to get anyone to follow you, and it's very difficult to lead a successful team.
If we dial in on Scott's story there with the run in Germany, just quickly, and some of the lessons that come out the back end of that, I think you guys obviously had a very clear connection point in my head. That was at least brotherhood and the fact that your lives would be in each other's arms. In business, for example, that's slightly different. So colleagues come and go. There isn't that much of a life and death there, and you probably will never really build, unless it's an exceptional circumstance, a relationship with a work colleague quite like you would in a situation like you would in the military there. So my question is, if we look at those lessons from Scott's run there and what he said there about trusting the people left and right of you, I guess in a different scenario like that, for example, in the business world, how do you apply those lessons and how do you start to foster and build that level of trust within the people around you, would you say, as a leader?
Yeah, well, it might not be life and death, but maybe, if I can, I would say, maybe in your civilian job, and there's a lot of things that you need to do. Maybe you're trying to quickly, rapidly respond to a proposal, and it's down to the last minute. And if you guys are top three for this proposal, the benefit, it could be tens of millions of dollars that the company could have in revenue if this proposal goes really well and you guys are selected and all those things. But it's like, hey, it's last minute. We've gotten all the way down the wire for whatever reason. Maybe they made some changes, but the whole team needs to stay late and try to wrap this thing up. And if that's your team and you're leading that team, and you look at your watch and you're like, hey guys, would love to stick around, but it's 4 o'clock and I gotta go pick my daughter up, and I'll see you guys in the morning. Let me know if you need something, shoot me a text, and you roll out the door. That's probably not the right answer. That's probably not the way to do business. And I know there's different circumstances and all of those type of things, but if you can't be that team player, if you can't lead by example, if the team's not going to trust you to be there when things are great, and then when things are bad, like, that's really hard to follow someone like that. So I think, that leadership and lead by example and building the trust and the calm breeds calm. Because I know for me, man, I retired back in January of 2017, and I've been a civilian since then, and I've worked at different different verticals. I've worked cultural institutions. I was a security consultant. I've done different things. So if their style for me is to like totally lose it and get upset and get mad and they're red faced, like I don't respond well to that. I will listen. I will, quietly shake my head or whatever, but that's not very effective for me. And I've actually seen that. I've seen that as a civilian, and it's just, to me, those people that can remain calm and cool and collected, those are the people I want to be around and I want to follow. And you just, man, you see a lot of different people, and some people just lose it. They freak out over stuff. And I would often say to myself, like, hey, no one is trying to shoot at us or kill us right now. So things aren't that bad. Like if the color of the carpet is not a deep red versus a deep brown or whatever, like I think we can figure this out, but no one's going to die over the color of the carpet. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, it's like my friend Wiz said. His first line was, "Has anyone died?" And then, okay, no one's died. It's gonna be all right, kind of a thing. But yeah, I totally see what you mean there. And something you also said back there as well, was just instant credibility. You saw someone's career and you instantly had that respect and trust in them. Let's look at you then. So 5 Bronze Star medals, one of them for valor and for heroism in Baghdad in 2006. So let's dig into that a bit then. So can you tell us more about that experience and what it taught you about those big ones, bravery, leadership, resilience under fire? Yeah, walk us through it. Talk to me about all that.
Yeah. So that the day that you're talking about is 17 April 2006, and we were at a small base. Definitely not like one of the large forward operating bases, the FOBs, where they had salsa lessons and they taught people how to do fly fishing. Like I wasn't, we weren't at a place like that, man. We were at a very small location. It was called Camp Apache. It was in Adamiyah, Iraq, which is a suburb of Baghdad. And in 2006, it was the last Sunni uh, neighborhood in and around Baghdad, because once Saddam got overthrown, obviously Saddam was Sunni. Once he got overthrown, all of his people that were in power, they took off, and then all the Shias moved in and took all those very, nice, lucrative type, areas and stuff. Uh, so we were in Adamiyah, and it was an absolute, it was a violent place. And we were co-located, different compounds, but co-located with an element of the 101st Airborne Division out of Fort Campbell, which just kind of goes full circle because, I served in the 101st Airborne Division at Fort Campbell before I became Special Forces. So we had an agreement, and I think this gets exactly back to the trust issue that I just brought up that we just talked about. We had an agreement with our brothers from the 101st, because they had asked us, hey, if we ever get into something and we're having a hard time, big firefight, whatever it might be, will you guys come and help us? Because we were their fastest response force. Um, their higher headquarters was in a different area, so it's like, hey, we know you guys are doing special forces stuff, and it's got to be secret or whatever, but if we need you, can we call you? Can we count on you? And it was like, yes, absolutely. With the caveat of like, hey, don't call us for dumb stuff, like no dumb stuff. But if you call us for something and you really need us, and you're in a big firefight, you're in a big engagement, yeah, man, we're gonna come and help you guys. That's what we're here to do. So that was a gentleman's agreement. And after they went through their pitch, we said the same thing, like, hey, we're a small element. Uh, if we get hit, whatever it might be, and we need your help, they would be the fastest response too. Will you come help us? And they were like, absolutely. So in a nutshell, that's basically what happened on 17 April 2006. Our brothers from the 101st got decisively engaged, and they'd been battling for like 5 hours, and they called for our help, and we responded, and we fought right alongside of them, and we were there for 2 hours. It was daylight. It was a bad weather day, so we had no air support, and I think that really contributed to the bad guys being so brave, because they knew that we had no air support. So they're like, "Hey, let's see what these guys got," and we had to show them. And even I think the trust was so important, and it was so significant that at one point in that firefight, we were there for 2 hours. Probably about an hour and a half of that firefight, uh, our engine block got shot out of the lead gun truck, which is the one that I was in. So we lost all power right in the middle of like the biggest firefight we'd ever been in our whole entire life. And we lost power. We didn't have anything. So um, we had to do a self recovery. We towed that vehicle out with our trail vehicle. We had these big tow straps that we could do that. And I told the 101st, I was like, "Hey, our engine block just got shot out. We're going to return to base, swap out the vehicle, get a brand new vehicle, get more ammunition. We'll bring you some, and we're going to come right back to the fight." And some people might hear that and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you guys were out there for an hour and a half and it's daylight." And we were in I mean, really, it's a 360-degree urban shooting environment. Like when you're in a city, like you don't rooftops, windows, gates, cars, like people are everywhere. It's a really tough environment. And I've told this story a lot, and people have a ton of questions about it, but it's like, why would you do that? Like, why would you get your engine block shot out, and you could just kind of like, "All right, man, our engine block got shot out. We're out. See you guys later. Peace." That didn't even enter our mind. Like, it wasn't even a thing. Like, it wasn't even a thing. And here's why. I mean, it was trust. We gave our word. Uh, I know that the 101st, they would have done the same thing for us. And it was not even a thought to leave those guys out there and not come back. Like, just wasn't even a thought. So we came back, we finished that whole fight. The insurgents at the end of it, they ended up having enough, and they kind of melded back into a little Sunni mosque. That it was actually not a little. It was one of the largest Sunni mosques in Baghdad. It was Abu Hanifa. But yeah, that's 17 April. That was the Bronze Star with Valor action, and it was definitely a very proud day. There was no hesitation for me or anyone on my team that we were going to go support our brothers and help them out in their time of need, for sure.
Yeah. I want to ask, so you got accommodation for that and you got a medal and everything, and it's obviously a very proud memory from what you said, but is it your proudest from your service? Is there something that maybe wasn't recognized or something that wasn't given a medal for that you are more proud of, or was that the top one for you?
That's a great question, actually. Thank you for asking that. That was a very, very proud moment, but it's not the proudest. And I talk about this in the book, Grit to Glory. The proudest moment that I ever was as a team sergeant in my entire career, professional career, obviously, was over a mission that we never conducted. We didn't even leave. We actually got disapproved. They didn't approve the mission, and that was later on that same rotation. Al Qaeda, they took two U.S. soldiers from the 101st. Basically, scarfed these guys up, kidnapped these guys, and tortured them and all those things. And they eventually killed them, but we didn't know that right away. And we heard about it, and it's basically like when they take American soldiers like that, it's almost like a cop in the United States or probably anywhere, when they get on the radio and they say, "Hey, shots fired, need help, get here," and you got every cop in the whole state that's responding to that because one of their brothers is under fire and needs help. That's what it's like when there's a missing American soldier, in Iraq or Afghanistan or anywhere. And so we got that call. Hey, we got two American soldiers that disappeared off the face of the earth, down in Yusufia, 2006. And we did everything that we possibly could to try to locate those guys through our human intelligence network. And we were getting things, we were getting, information, but we were having a hard time trying to dual source the information because it's a tough area to work and it's not very populated. So just a tough area to work. But and in addition, they had color systems in Iraq. So like, let's say that we're going to take a convoy and let's just say we're going from Baghdad to Taji. And we would always look at the road conditions, and it was green, yellow, red, black. So let's say we're going from Baghdad to Taji, and it's like, hey, what's the road conditions that morning? It's like, hey, it's green, like no issues, no IEDs. They cleared everything, no problems, no one's reported anything. Like, it's green. Let's say, hey, we're going from the green zone in Baghdad over to Bayop on Route Irish. And it's like, hey, the road conditions yellow. There may be something, may not, not really for sure, but it's not really so significant that, proceed with the extreme caution or whatever. And then, of course, you have the road conditions that are red that mean like, hey, there's probably going to be an IED. Well, if you have a road condition black, that means there's IEDs and you're probably going to get hit with an IED. Like, if you travel that road, black basically is like, hey, avoid that at all costs. So when we started getting information on these two American soldiers, we had no helo assets because, we were just a regular special forces team. We didn't, let's not kid anybody. We didn't really rate to have our own air assets. So we didn't have that capability. But so we were going to have to use our gun trucks and our unarmored, and we had like two armored vehicles to get down there to try to get these guys. And the roads were all black. They were all black. And I gathered the guys and I said, hey, I want you all to understand what I'm asking you to do here. Um, this is very dangerous. The roads are black. We don't have all armored vehicles to ride in. This is extremely dangerous. And I knew in my heart of hearts that I'm looking at guys, and to include myself, that we're probably not going to make it back from this one. And it's like, hey, are you guys good with doing this mission if it gets approved? Every person wanted to do that mission. Absolutely, we're going to go. And we had some other guys that had joined us from the Iraqi side, but that really hit my heart heavy because I knew what I was asking them to do, and they all stood there and they all just manned up and said, hey, we're going to do it. And it was basically our Saving Private Ryan moment as a special forces team. If you're familiar with that movie, like, hey, what's a guy worth? Like, we're going to risk all these other dudes for one guy because, his 8 brothers were killed in combat or whatever that story was. It was like a dilemma for us, but it wasn't a dilemma because everybody was full steam ahead. Like, we're going to do this. And uh, right before we were going to launch, uh, our boss, the battalion commander, called down and said, hey, stand down. And he didn't say it over the phone, but what he was basically alluding to was, hey, these guys are dead. This went from a rescue to a recovery. But he didn't say it like that. He just said, hey, stand down. There's nothing that we can do for these guys. We have national level assets that are working this, that have the capabilities, that have the helos, all those things. We, at our level, we can't do anything for these guys. I appreciate the courage and all those things, but just stand down. And I've always reflected back on that time, man. That's the proudest I've ever been. And it's kind of silly, but it's the proudest I've ever been for a mission that we never even did. But just the way that my guys stood up and said, hey, here I am, send me.
Wow. That is absolutely amazing. I mean, what an incredible thing. And, it speaks to the level of trust and camaraderie and brotherhood to be able to weigh up the lives of a whole team of people for one person. It's an incredible thing to have that kind of a bond with people where you would just know and you would be those people. So I think it's amazing. The last thing I want to get into then, so obviously you mentioned it there and it's in the back there, the book. So we always go into a bit of mentoring for young people towards the end of each episode. So you mentored aspiring soldiers, Green Berets. I'd love to ask you then. So if we can two-part this, so what do you think is the most important lesson to focus on for a young person nowadays to instill the right values in people, really courage, duty, and loyalty, like you've learned obviously along your journey? And then part two of that, talk to me a bit about the book and how that can help people along that journey too and what it offers.
Yeah, back to the courage thing, a lot of people say this and it might be worn out a little bit, but, courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the ability to act despite it. You know, you're going to be scared, there's going to be fear, but you still do it. And I've heard others say, and actually, this was a Medal of Honor recipient, a very brave and courageous pilot from Vietnam that was a medevac pilot, Pat Brady, and single-handedly rescued, I think, 5,000 plus, during his tours in Vietnam as a medevac pilot, and that includes Vietnamese as well, not just all Americans. But he used to say, "Fear is an emotion, courage is a decision." And I always like that, because I think for most people, if you have a pulse, if you have a heartbeat, and you're going into something dangerous and you don't know how it's going to work out, like you're going to have a little bit of fear, but hopefully you have that trust in your teammates that you can still do it despite the fear. Uh, Now I do get a chance to talk to groups. I get a chance. I'm fortunate. I get a chance to talk to kids in high school, and I try to tell them these three things. And I think it's so simple. And I think this is kind of, as part of that mentoring. And hey, what are some of the things I can do? I typically tell them, the high school kids, it's like, hey, I'm going to tell you three things, and they're going to sound so simple to you that you're probably going to laugh, like, oh no, that's so basic, it's so easy, it's so simple. But I typically say, hey, I'm going to tell you three things that are very simple, very basic, but trust me, 95% of the population cannot do these things consistently. So if you can do these three small, basic, simple things, you're going to be ahead of 95% of your peers. Here are the three things. Number one, work hard. Number two, be humble. Number three, don't quit. If you can do those three things consistently, you're going to do great things, whether that's in the military, whether that's in an elite, uh, university, or academy, or you're going to go work for, Chase Bank. If you can do those three things, you're going to be really, really successful.
Nice. Those are some big things right there. And it's interesting because it is true. Doing this simple stuff really well is what really, really matters the most sometimes. And people get overcomplicated. They sometimes think, hey, I got to do this, find the hack, or I've got to find the really nitty gritty stuff. But actually, it comes back down to just doing the basic stuff really well. And I agree. Those are the big ones. And so, last thing, you've written a book. I know a bit about book writing. I did my own one. I published it recently. It did really well. So
Oh,
I know.
congratulations.
Thank you, sir. So from one author to another, how did it all go? And talk to me about what it is, what it can offer, and yeah, just talk to me all things about your book.
Yeah, so you can relate, and once again, man, congratulations, because I know that process and it's tough. I didn't realize how tough writing a book was, and maybe you could consider me kind of, I cheated through the process because I had a very talented co-author that worked right alongside me and was a great partner. Her name is Lauren Ungowdy. Uh, I couldn't have done it without her, man. But even with a very talented, skilled, experienced author, it was tough. It was grueling. There were some days where I'm like, man, am I doing the right thing? Do I really want to, write this book? I mean, it was just very tough. And there were some things that happened in 2006 because the book is based on a January to August 2006 combat rotation to Iraq when I was leading a special forces team. But there were some things that happened in there that once I went through it, I just buried it and compartmentalized it inside. And I never did revisit it. I just left it tucked down way inside. And when Lauren and I were working together on the book, she's like, "Hey man, we need to talk about this." And fortunately for me, she was very professional. She's worked with a lot of special ops guys, and she knows that we each have our own little stories and our way of dealing with things and stuff like that. So she was great the way that she was able to work with me. And then so it's tough, it's grueling, and then I also learned that it was therapeutic to actually get those things out, and we were able to talk about them. And I was able to realize, like, I was there, I saw all these things, and that's the way war is. Like, there's some things that you see that you can't unsee ever. But I was able to talk with that, with to Lauren, and it wasn't my fault. Like, I didn't do those things that I saw. I was just basically a witness, and terrible, horrible things. But I kind of had to let that go. And when I was able to talk to Lauren about it, it was very therapeutic, and I let that go. So I once I got to the end, man, I enjoyed it. And then when the book got published, December 3rd of 2024, I was blown away, and didn't realize this, but it came out as an Amazon #1 new release, and it kind of created a little hype. Yeah, it created a little hype, and I wasn't really prepared for that. And I'm not saying that I didn't have any confidence that I just didn't know what I didn't know. And when that happened, uh, there were some other things. It was hard for us to keep the books in stock at Amazon, with the system, with the setup that we initially had, because I had a certain amount of books, and my publishing company down in Florida were having to send them to the Amazon distribution centers to get them sent out to people, and there was a delay. It was taking a long time. And then because of the demand, we had to go to print on demand. So that way, any of the Amazon print centers or distribution centers, they can print a paperback, or they can print a hardcover, and they can get it out the next day. Like, that's how they're able to do that with all those books, is the print on demand. So that's great, man. I've done a lot of great book events. I've been back to West Virginia, my hometown, done some in Texas. Lauren and I did a great week long book events in New York City. We paired up with the fire department in New York Police Department. We were at One World Observatory with the Port Authority. We were at the New York Athletic Club. Man, we went crazy up in New York, and it was so well received, and done a lot of podcasts and talked about the book. And it's selling really well. The Probably one of the biggest learning points, and maybe there's some folks out there that are listening that are thinking about writing a book, and I really want to hear some of your experiences too, if we have time. But I'd say one of the things that I feel like I could have done better, I wish that we would have rolled the book out initially with print on demand for paperback and hardcover, so we weren't trying to stress and worry about getting those books sent out. I think we should have done that from the get-go, and I wish that I would have launched my Audible with the book, because I still don't have an Audible. And everybody asks me when the Audible, it's like, "Hey dude, I'm always driving, I'm in my car, like I don't have time to read, but I listen to books all the time." Or, "Hey, I listen to books on the treadmill," or, "Hey, I want to listen on the plane," or whatever. And it's like, oh gosh, why didn't I get my Audible done? So those are some of the big things that I learned, and I would love to pass it back to you, brother, if we have time, of course. And maybe you can tell me about your process, or you can tell me about some things that you learned when you came out with your book. Hopefully you didn't make the mistakes I did.
No, definitely. I think we actually had pretty similar experiences. So when I launched my one, well, I mean, I'll give you the concept first. So I was trying to find a way of how I can crunch down these podcast episodes into something that's a bit more accessible for people, like a book, basically. And how do I do that? So I took 30 of the episodes of the podcast, like our one today, that I thought were really impactful, and I turned them into their 5 key takeaways. So an hour of conversation with the world's highest performers, crunch it down to the 5 key takeaways, and then put it into a small 5-6 page chapter that has the how to apply the lessons, what they are, what my take is on them, and how you can actually reflect on them and really improve in your own life. So it ended up at 150 secrets to greatness, and featured a lot of very cool people. Had a foreword from a Blue Angel, and I went straight down the KDP process, man. The Prince on Demand stuff was great. The way that they integrated the ebook side of things and the paperback and the hardback as well, that was brilliant. I found I really enjoyed the writing part of it, and it made me reflect a lot more on the lessons maybe that I'd skipped sometimes just by hosting. Because when you host a podcast, you sometimes so focused on making a great episode that you don't actually think too deeply yourself into the lessons occasionally, and that you miss stuff, really, really valuable stuff, I find. And going back through those, combing through them and finding the best bits of info I could from these people was really great for me. What I wish I did better, I think I wish I'd given myself a bit more time. I ended up rushing myself around the Christmas time to get it out there, and it did do great. It did hit the bestseller rankings, and it was a number one hot new release for a bit of time. And I've done my first author talk a few days ago, and it was a real thrill because all of those 30 people got to promote it and share it on the day of launch and everything. But I wish I had more time, and I completely agree. The audiobook side of things, the Audible thing, was just an absolute missed hit. I didn't go for it. I didn't do that. I didn't really see the potential in it, but it was when I'd launched it and people were kind of like, hey, where's the Audible? That's when I was like, oh, yeah. So I'm still kind of twiddling my
Yeah,
thumbs on that one and just thinking, do
me
I do
too.
this? Do I do it myself, or do I get someone to read it? So that's another thing. But I think it's a great process, the whole thing, learning all about it, adapting, overcoming, and finding what works and learning how to market it. Because quite literally, you could write a book that has this, the secrets to everlasting life, and it could be true, but no one would ever see it if it's not marketed right. So you got to have a great marketing strategy too. So I think doing the book and doing all this stuff, it's great. It pushes your comfort zone. And I think looking at what you did and the stuff that you've done, I think you absolutely nailed it. So we need to do a book exchange, my friend. I'll send you
Yes,
one
let's
and you
do it.
send me one.
I will do it. You send me your address, man, and I will make sure, because I have some books I got to send out. But I think that's fascinating, man, and I look forward to reading your books, and your book, and it's funny, or it's interesting that you had a uh similar experience as mine,
Yeah.
because the amount of people that have told me, oh dude, is it on Audible? I'll start listening to it right now. And it's like, oh gosh, man, I'm leaving so much money on the table. And then, doing a little bit of research on the Audible system, and how many people are doing it that way. Like it's something that I totally missed, because I'm a in my hands kind of reader. Like, I'm old school. I want to
Yeah.
have the book in my hands. I want to read a book like that. But man, it's going to Audible. Like,
Yeah.
everybody and all the Audible connoisseurs were telling me, it's like, hey man, I want to read your book, or I want to listen to your book on Audible, and it has to be in your voice. It has to be in your voice. You wrote the book. It has to be. So maybe that's something for you to think about too, brother.
One of the things that I never would have been able to predict this, but one of the things that I think I massively missed out on just slightly, and I don't think it's my fault, but it's a lesson learned for next time, is that I think I lost out on a massive proportion of ebook sales um because people, I've discovered, think that Kindle is the tablet and it's not the free app that you can get on just about any phone. So I think people saw the ebook and then they went to the Amazon, followed the link, and then saw Kindle available on Kindle for the ebook. And then they were like, oh, I don't have a Kindle tablet, so I can't get it. And then they went off and then that was it. So I think people don't actually know that Kindle is available on every phone, every iPad, every tablet, and every computer. So I think there was probably a missed bunch there, but that's just again another lesson for next time. You know, how do you make that clear to people, right? Anything like that for you on your end with the kind of promotion side of it?
Well, I do a lot of promotion, man, and I'm heavy on LinkedIn as my primary. And if there's any of the listeners out there that would like to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm super active. I typically post every day, and you can find me at Darrell dash Utt. So it's Darrell dash UTT. And it's funny, man, as far as book promotion and marketing, what really hits, and I don't know how to like quantify it, like with a post, like, oh man, after this post, somebody went and bought 25 books or whatever. But I know as far as popularity and views and things like that, if I do something comedy wise that talks about my book, like what I've been doing the last 2 days, the whole thing with Elon Musk and the federal employees, you got to send the top 5 things that you accomplished in the last week. I did a play off of that, and I did like a fake email, and it's like, hey, here's the 5 things that I did last week. I read all the great Amazon reviews for the book Grit to Glory. I borrowed $20 from the IRS to purchase the book. I ordered Grit to Glory. I read Grit to Glory. I suggested that everyone in the IRS read it. So I'm kind of doing like a little parody of that. And then this morning, I did a response from Elon Musk to this person saying, hey, you're fired. You have to leave Grit to Glory. And I do like a picture, but all of my funny stuff gets tons of views. I could do a serious post, like I could post something about a review. It's got a picture of my book, and it'll get a little bit, but not much action. So it's kind of interesting. I do post on Instagram as well. You can find me on Instagram at Darrell dot Utt. Not as active on Instagram, but I'm super active on LinkedIn. And you can get Grit to Glory, a Green Beret's journey from West Virginia to the streets of Baghdad, wherever books are sold. It's super convenient and easy. If you want to go to Amazon and pick up a copy, you can get a paperback, you can get a hardcover, you can get the Kindle. Hopefully, I'll get off my butt and start getting this Audible going soon. And if anybody wants a signed copy, you can just reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can set something up. And I'll get the book. I'll sign it. If I still have some of my challenge coins, I'll get you a challenge coin and get it shipped out to you. I've done that a few times because some people just want the signed copy. So happy to do that. But yeah, I would love to connect with anybody out there, and you can reach out to me. And I would like to give a quick shout out to Rope Solutions. Do a lot of coaching in the oil and gas sector is the primary right now, and just started working with those guys, and they have a fabulous team. And maybe if you're interested, you could check out Rope Solutions. You could Google them or find them on LinkedIn and see about all the great things that they're doing. I'm over the moon happy that I get a chance to represent Rope and wear this cool hat. Just spent some time with them in West Texas, and I'm looking forward to going back out there and doing some more coaching.
That's great. Well, all the links to all of that great stuff are going to be in the descriptions and the the description area in the Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you're listening in right now. It's going to be somewhere available there. If it's not on the screen, if you're audio only, it will be in the description, as I mentioned. But yeah, I think that sums it up then. Daryl, wow, what an absolute pleasure. That was a great talk. I really appreciate the points you hit there. We've got some great stuff done. Your backstory is awesome. Looking at the Special Forces selection, that was great. Really good insights there. Getting into leadership, awesome bits of info there. And those stories, man, those hit home. So I appreciate you sharing all of that today, and for your honesty and for, letting me pick your brain and make this episode. It's been fantastic and a true honor. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, of course. The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for listening. This was episode 135. If you'd like to listen to the past episodes, go and have a look at the channel. If you'd like to listen in for the future ones too, make sure to hit that subscribe button and spread some love by leaving a like and a comment. Signing off for now. Good night. See you in the next one.